wolf? That can't be a wolf during the day. That sure sounds like it. Jesus, Murphy. It's turkey hunt season out here, eh? I haven't seen my turkeys. I guess they know, because I have about a dozen wild turkeys that run around here. And I haven't seen them yet, so they're probably hiding. Jamie's father, Joe, I said, listen, if you want to come over and grab some of them turkeys, like whatever your legal limit and everything is, I said, that'd be great. Just give me one and I'll share it with my mom, because she hates the wild turkeys, because they sometimes, when she's outside, like just, you know, doing her garden or something, sometimes they'll chase her, you know, and they're crazy turkeys. They're like wild, like Canadian geese. Don't fuck with wild turkeys. So anyway, but the other thing they do, and she's convinced they do it on purpose, is that if they chase her into the house or whatever, or if they don't and she's doing a thing, they'll come up on her deck and start shitting on the deck. And she swears it's on purpose. So she's 81. It was a lot easier for her to clean all that when she was younger. So, but yeah, she gets pretty irritable. So I thought, well, hey, if Joe comes over, he can reduce the population. It gives him another place to hunt. He's a great hunter, very, like, you know, he doesn't kill anything or maim anything. Like, kill anything, but I mean, improperly. He's a very, very good hunter. And I would actually do well to hang with him while he hunts, because I could probably learn quite a bit from him. And, but anyway, yeah, I mean, even if we reduce the I don't know what his limit is, but whatever the limit is, I mean, if we reduce it by that much, that's great. You know, just keep them down to a dull roar here, because I'm certain there's more than a dozen. That's just a dozen that come up here. I know there's more back, you know, in the back. So, but I do have a fisher hanging behind here. I don't know why he's hanging around back here. He doesn't get into the garbage. There's nothing here for him, unless he's realized that the squirrels and stuff are coming here and he thinks he's going to come get them, but I never see him here. He's always in the back. But anyways, why was I saying something about the fisher? All right, the fisher would take a wild turkey, I expect. So, but I'll bet that's why I haven't seen them up here like usual this time of year. It's the only reason I can think that they don't do their usual routine. So what it means is they're not here, then they're going through Mom's yard. She just hasn't seen them yet. So, I mean, they might walk through at 3 in the afternoon when she's napping over there. So, and, you know, they don't stay in the yard all day. I mean, they just kind of pass through and go to wherever they hang out back there. So, anyway, we'll see what Joe says. Wild turkey here, it's not something you just throw in the oven like a regular turkey. You have to slow cook it big time if you don't smoke it. I prefer to smoke it and like 10-12 hour smoke, because then at least the meat it's so good, because it's wild, but it's toughness, eh? You know, so you got to cook it different than you would normally you know, one of those fake turkeys or whatever they call them in the grocery stores that they inject with shit and everything. But, yeah. Anyway, I mean, the smokers here are working, so I don't care. And Stepan's got a big smoker at his place. So, I mean, if he gets, like, I don't know what size they are. I would say they're probably, all of them look right now, 15, maybe 20 pounds, maybe. I don't know, you know. But they're fair size wild turkeys, so anyway. Got skunked yesterday, but that's okay. I don't know when we're going to go fishing next. I got lots of gas in the boat. We barely used any gas yesterday. It's one thing about that Mariner, even though she's such a snarling motor, she's really good on gas. Even when she's running rich like that, it reminds me I got to check the plugs. I'll bring you guys with me when because it's 4-cylinder, eh? So 2-stroke Mariner motor. It's a 1992. Might have been the last year they made those. Anyway, that will be left to my my step niece, along with everything else. That's Anna's daughter, and she probably have that motor for as long as she lives, and if she gives it to her daughter, she will have it. As long as you keep it tuned up and happy, no reason for that motor not to be around another 20 or 30 years. Look at it now, if it's a 92. That's 30 years. It runs like a bat out of hell. So, anyway, course, I had the greatest mechanic in the world tuning it. Like, the guy should have been tuning Formula Ones. Like, he'd have never done it because it would have gotten in the way of beer drinking. And he loved to run his own garage because, he liked customers. My friend Norm that was murdered, one of the founders of the camp here. And, but I mean, that man spent more time tinkering on that Mariner motor than he ever did catching fish. He just tinkered and tinkered, and he was tinkering with the trailer wheels all the time, constantly, greasing them, taking bearings out, putting them back in, and it was just like, I'd sit there and watch him at the campsite, and I'm like, you gonna come on over now and have a cheeseburger and sit around the fire? And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna. And the only time he does that is because he wants to sit down now and drink beer uninterrupted after his beer. Oh, God love him. I miss him, I tell you. I really do miss him. I'll never understand why Luck, we know who murdered him. I mean, it was the roommate, Luck, and he was one of us. There was never any inkling, man. Nothing. Luck was a special needs person. That was all. Autistic, I guess. People used to say mentally challenged, but I knew Luck not good enough that no, I'd say he was autistic because Luck was a very intelligent young man. But, like people with like Asperger's, he was just out of place. But not the kind of out of place I would have ever worried about him. They used to come up to the camp, when we had the camp up in Cloyne. Anyway, I don't know why I'm thinking about that today. I guess it's because I went fishing, and every walleye season before he was murdered, he was always with me. And we never caught fish, but we didn't care. He had his beer, I had my weed, we had our music. We just sat in the boat and float around in circles. We didn't even, like Chris and I went serious fishing, but me and Norm, it was just like, laugh about some old story from camping from 20 years ago, whatever, right? Newfie, we talked about our friend the Newfie, another founding member of the camp. Never see anymore because he got old and married. Anyways, yeah. It was not always, roses and everything with me and Norm. We fought like a couple of banshees because we had our set ways, but when it come down to it, boy, I couldn't talk about anybody more loyal as a friend. But though, yeah, he just had this funny thing about motors. He was constantly tinkering. I remember some of my old minivans, and he'd be the mechanic for them, and, I wasn't allowed to touch anything. I wasn't allowed to touch the oil. I wasn't allowed to do anything. He was, no, that's my job. I do that. And we get to the campsite, and, I'd be looking around for him. Oh, he's not over by the boat. He's not over in his tent. Where is he? Hood up on my minivan, and he's in there tinkering around on the motor, doing God knows what. Anyway, so I'm so terrified to let anybody touch that Mariner motor because he's got it tuned in a way that, I don't know, I haven't met a mechanic yet that's figured out what he did with those carburetors and stuff. So, I mean, it's not like it's that complicated, but it's got something to do with jets or something. I don't know, man. But fuck, he spent a long time. And I mean, I remember at the campground, even the campground owner, and they were our friends, is, of course you have water at your campsite, like hook it up, and we had a hose for outside for washing our cars and everything. But of course, the campground was on a big well, so we didn't want to go crazy and waste our water. We were told not to worry about it, but sometimes, Norm would put the cups on and then run the water, and then he would run the motor because, instead of bringing it down, the campground was on a little lake, he could have brought it down and do that. But with his legs at the time, or his hips actually were bad before his operation, he couldn't stand in the boat and work on the motor. It was easier to stand behind it. So he'd be running that all the time. The campsite would get covered in water. Because I'm telling you, he'd be out there 3 hours fiddling around with those carbs. And I asked him, are they broke or something? He says, no. He says, I just want it to be able to go full speed at high speed, but I want us to be able to troll at 1 mile an hour, 2 mile an hour, 3 mile an hour without the motor loading up because, it's not running fast enough to keep, because it's a 2-stroke with oil to keep the, you got to start gobbling up the plugs. Well, whatever he did, man, he made it happen. And nobody believes me until they're in the boat with me or they're beside me. I'll say, I'll show you, put the, because I got the speedometer thing. And I showed him. I said, I don't know. And he says, you can do that all day. I said, I've done it for 10 hours straight. He said, just trolling like that at 2 miles an hour. I said, yeah. Yeah, man, Palmerston Lake. I'll probably do it Saturday the 27th, if we can last that long in the boat at this age. But I did it on Georgian Bay. As soon as I hit the throttle, she just kind of, you know, gives a little fart of white smoke or white blue smoke, and then zoom down the lake. And by the time I hit the dock, if it is loaded up, well, it ain't by the time I get there. And he made me used to buy that sea foam, and I was only once in a while. He says, don't do this every week. He says, just 2 little caps, throw that in the gas can. And he says, Lieber be. So, and he says, you really only need to do it in spring and then in the fall. He says, when you park it. I'm like, okay. So I followed that thing with him for, oh my God, when did he first start telling me to put sea foam in 1990, late 90s? So, and that was the first motors we had, like the 9.9s, 9.8 Merc. The 9.9s were the Johnsons, and then Evinrude's. I had a 15, which there was another job. He found out that the 9.9s, the 15, and the 20 horsepower Evinrude's were all the same exact motor, CCs and everything, but the carburetors were different size to make the different horsepower. So if you had a 9.9 and you wanted to turn it into a 20 horsepower, you got the 20 horsepower carb and put it on. What arrives in the fucking mail a few weeks later? The 20 horsepower carb. So he rebuilds the 15 horsepower. Okay, here's what he does. We had a 15 horsepower that the motor got fried, like melted. So he fixes all that up, okay? Then he puts a 20 horsepower carb on it, okay? That size. Now that thing is running at 20. So then what he does is he takes the 15 horsepower carb off of that one and puts it on the 9.9 and makes that into a 15, which we promptly sold, made a halfway decent profit on it, and that's what paid for the other stuff. But he tinkered around with that. That was when we still had the shop and we actually were doing repairs on Mississippi Lake. It was called Mississippi Outboard. Anyways, I actually still own that name for stuff. But anyways, that's what he was doing there, you know. And he had all these motors modified, and he's like, there, now we got what we really need, a 15 and a 20. And I'm like, wouldn't it have been better to keep the 9.9? He says, what's the difference? He says, it's the same size motor. It's only the horsepower. He says, you don't need to turn the throttle wide open. He says, but we have it if we need it. He says, but it's still small and light enough that we can get into these tight places we like to go in. And I'm like, I can't argue with that logic, man. I really cannot. So, you know what? The blackfly aren't turning up here. Or at least they're not sticking around. I realize it's the wind, but you know what? I'm going to put one of these up anyway. It looks like I might be sitting out here for a bit. I was just going to ask you guys if I went and got my joint and smoked it, but I did. I just forgot while I was talking to you. So, yeah, see, there's a few little ones, but fuck, 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, 5 minutes of me, or, you know, one of these, and they're gone. See you guys later. Bring on the next bunch. You won't be reproducing for next year. And besides that, I'm getting Stefan's son to build me bat houses. He's good with little woodwork with that. Jace, he made me my walking stick. I asked him to make me another one, so he's supposed to be doing that. And I need him to make the sign for the camp out front. I don't have a wooden sign for the camp, and it's Winterfell Hunt and Fish Camp. And then I have the logo, if you've ever seen the logo on the YouTube or on the Twitter, Facebook. We want to put a sign out front with the mailbox, so all my mail goes down to my mother's, and it's kind of a pain in the balls for me. It doesn't bother her any, but you know, it'd be easier for the driver too. He doesn't have to, you know, because she doesn't really get any big packages or anything, but I do, and it'd be easier for him to come in my laneway. So, especially in the winter, because out here, you know. But yeah, those motors. When Norm died, Norm had a bunch of my stuff in his garage in Elmer, and his family didn't even bother to call me to tell me he was murdered. I found out. Who told me? I was in shock. I just was like, oh my God, like this can't even be true. Like it was like I just suddenly it was like a nightmare or something. Anyway, of course I found out it was true. I went and looked for newspaper articles, and I'm like, well, why didn't they phone me, the Richards family? Like, what the fuck? Like, there was nobody closer to him for the last 30 years. I mean, I was at their house. I never had a beef with anybody in there. Maybe they didn't know how to find me, but his sister Eleanor did. I mean, she was on my Facebook. She knew how to reach out to me. Never did. And then he has a garage, and he'd closed his big auto mechanic garage. So he had his garage at his house in Elmer, and I had found a nice big Husky compressor and everything. So he had rented a bay in Luskville just to do tires. He had a tire machine and he was just going to do tires, but he needed the compressor. I said, well, we don't need it. We don't have the shop on Mississippi Lake anymore. So I said, take it down there, and then when we build the shop here, we'll bring it back up and run the lines, and we'll have the air tools and everything. And well, that disappeared. Nobody ever called me about that. There were one ATV there that belonged to me that he hadn't settled up with me on, and that belonged to a friend that I would just return it to my friend and not even keep it, because it came from a friend that it really hurt him to sell that. He had two of them because he's a big bear guy, 350 big bears, and you can see why. I mean, such a small little ATV and from its time and everything, but God, you can kill them and they never seem to get stuck. Solid axle across the back, eh? Anyways, so that disappeared, and a lot of my fishing equipment disappeared because it was stored there. Camping equipment that we both shared that was stored there, all gone, because I'm sure they sold the house, and didn't keep all that stuff, but nobody bothered to phone me. And I feel it's rude for me to reach out, because I mean, they didn't bother to contact me and telling me that my closest friend and brother, was murdered by Luck. I feel bad for Luck. I'm angry at him, but I feel bad because I know he's not in the right mind necessarily. And I would have liked to hear the story from the newspapers and stuff, but yeah, nobody bothered to reach out. I just really kind of sets with me wrong. But there would have been a time I would have jumped on my Harley, I would have rode over there, I would be doing Stone Cold Steve Austin and open up a can of whoop ass. But I'm older now. He was, that was 2 years ago, February 15th. And so I was, 58 then, even then. But yeah. Anyway, I will always talk about him. We're going to make a little memorial for him here at the camp on the sign, like a second sign. One of Winterfell's founders. When it was him, we called it the fishing camp. So he never lived long enough to see the new name. He would have loved it. So he loved Game of Thrones too. He loved all that HBO stuff. He didn't watch much TV, but what he did was the quality stuff. So, but between watching a TV or working on a motor in the garage, he'd be a lot happier doing that. So, and happier with well, I don't know if there's still country music, but there was a country channel he used to listen to, CKBY 105 FM 105.7, which was country here in Ottawa. And when he had his garage in Elmer with his partner there, Pat, I mean, that thing would be blaring and he would just be yapping with whatever customer or people around, and the tools are flying and tires are flying and parts, and he's just doing his thing, up and going, doing what he does. He was like literally born to be a mechanic of mechanical things. It's like some people are born to do pianos, I'm not saying that I'm John Bonham or Keith Moon, but I'm certain my talent was born to be a drummer, because I just like to make music and bash away at drums and things. No, actually it's motorized vehicles. I never did get to race other than a couple times motocross when I was young, and I just about killed myself. I didn't know what I was doing. But on my own with motorcycles and ATVs, I don't crash. You know, unless I do something really, really stupid, like I've done a couple times. But I mean, I just find it so easy. And then driving trucks, I just find it very easy. I did from the time I started at 16. I wasn't good when I first started, but I had good teachers. A different era. You did something wrong, you got cuffed in the head from a boss or a fellow worker or whatever. It's how I was raised. You know, raised in the trucking world. But it learned me stuff. And you know, if I still had my license, I'd get hired tomorrow morning, and probably for a lot more money than the average driver. You know, I'm not saying the greatest driver in the world. I would never say that. I'm just saying that that's what I was born to do. Like Norm was born to work on the mechanical things. He just, you know, he was a big fella, but he had these long, spindly kind of fingers, and he used to kind of, you know, he'd walk around with them, and he'd be kind of like when he's talking, the, you know, the hands and the finger, but like they're like a spider. He would just go in there and. I don't know, man. It's really hard to explain unless you saw it. I'm sure you people out there, somebody out there, you know, has a friend or a family member or something that's like that. You know, everybody in a family has like a mechanical. My Uncle Larry was the mechanical kind of guy. He worked at General Motors in the 50s and 60s and 70s, 80s, I guess, at General Motors in Detroit.
Clothes, late night shows, boogie down at the bar, fiddle tunes and homemade booze, but it always goes too far. Shooting pool, crack a jack, take off now and don't look